Before we get started, Talk Music Talk has a newsletter, a weekly email featuring the current week's guests, plus what past guests are up to. Also, I'll tell you about shows I've attended and new music that I like. To sign up, head on over to talkmusictalk.com, click on the link, subscribe to newsletter, and you are all set. That's talkmusictalk.com. And now for today's episode. Hello there. Welcome to Talk Music Talk with Boys, episode 123. If this is your first time listening to Talk Music Talk, let me tell you that it's Talk Music Talk with Boys. I am Boys. I am your podcasting host, and Talk Music Talk is a weekly music interview podcast where I have long-form conversations with people who are connected to music, emerging, established, all genres, all different backgrounds, music therapists, music journalists, singers, songwriters, musicians, and on episode 123, Emil Wilbekin. When I think of Emil Wilbekin, I think of culture, pop culture, music culture, style culture, and excellence, of course, because culture has been the umbrella of his career. Many wonderful things in his career that he has accomplished, such as over 12 years at Vibe magazine, culminating with him being the editor-in-chief in 2004. 2 years prior to that, under his guidance, the magazine won a National Magazine Award for General Excellence. He's also had editor stints at Essence Magazine, Giant Magazine, Marc Ecko's Complex Magazine, and none of this is by accident. Emil is just a go-getter. He talks about so much in this conversation, this hour conversation. He talks about how he achieved all that he has, from growing up in Cincinnati to lawyer parents who exposed him to a constant diet of culture. Again, that word. We talk about pivotal moments in his life, like mentors and peers who saw something special in him that sparked before he saw it in himself and helped him along in his career. And also we talk about his hustle. He never stops. He's always striving for new and exciting goals. We also talk about his coming out as a gay man professionally. We go into his past projects. We talk about his wonderful new endeavors like World of Wilbekin, and also Native Son, his two newest projects. This is a fascinating conversation with a consummate tastemaker. What an inspiring life. Here it is, without further ado, my conversation with Emil Wilbekin on Talk Music Talk. Enjoy. So you went to Hampton?
Yes.
And then Columbia?
Yes.
During this period, or even before, did you have an idea of what a dream job would look like?
Well, I think for me growing up, I knew, like in college, that I wanted to have my own magazine. I knew I wanted to be like about black culture. I grew up in a house that was filled with magazines, newspapers. We watched news, but we also watched movies and TV. Mm-hmm. My mother has her master's in music, so she was a child prodigy and played piano from a very, very early age, and has her master's in music, like I said. So my house was very cultural. So it was almost like I didn't have a choice but to be engaged in culture. And so I used to tear out all these magazine photos and put them on my wall, which my mother thinks is upstairs in our attic, and I'm hoping that it is. So it wasn't specifically like, yes, I want to be a magazine editor, but I knew I wanted to do something with culture and media and beautiful images.
Yeah. Did you know how you were going to prepare to get to that?
Well, so here's the funny story. When I was graduating from high school, I had no idea what I wanted to study. At that point, I liked fashion design and art. And my parents are lawyers, so they were like, we want you to go to law school. And I was like, that's not happening. So they were like, well, I don't know about the fashion thing, but why don't you try to figure out how to do something that's practical and creative? And so my speech teacher in high school said, why don't you consider communications? Okay. And so that's kind of how I went down the path of studying mass media arts at Hampton and falling into newspaper journalism, which then turned into magazine journalism.
Did you like to write?
I always like to write.
Okay.
In fact, I won a writing essay when I was in the third grade in elementary school about energy conservation in our city, which is so weird because that was the assignment, so I did it. But I was like, oh, I won, so it was good. So I always like to write, and I always like to kind of create things. So stories. I like to read. I love old movies. Anything visual and creative, I like.
Where are you from?
I'm from Cincinnati, Ohio.
Okay. I'm from Pittsburgh.
Near you. I know, near you.
Yes. And what was it like there, Cincinnati?
Cincinnati is a very interesting town because it is about 30% black. It is very conservative, but the black community there is very strong. But there's a lot of celebrities from Cincinnati and a lot of music from Cincinnati. So, L.A. Reid grew up in the neighborhood next to mine, and I remember when he was in The Deal when I was in high school. Bootsy Collins grew up in my neighborhood. And then there's a lot of art and culture in Cincinnati. There's a symphony, there's an art museum, there's, ballet, there's orchestra. And again, I grew up in this very cultural household, so it seemed kind of boring to me there, but there were all the kind of trappings of a big city, but it was very conservative. And so Mark Twain has this really great quote that if the world came to an end, he'd move to Cincinnati because it would happen 50 years later. So I kind of knew that I needed to get out of there.
Okay, even Mark Twain knew?
Even Mark Twain. But, all these amazing people are from Ohio and Cincinnati. So Sarah Jessica Parker's from Cincinnati. There's a lot of really, really just cool people from Cincinnati.
So did you have very young that wanderlust, I've got to get out of here?
So, my parents met and married in New York and then moved to Ohio to raise my brother and I. I have an older brother who's 6 years older. And so I was raised with this very kind of cosmopolitan, cultural household. My mother's originally from Des Moines, Iowa, and my father's from St. Croix. So we had like West Indian, we had Midwest, but my mother was very New York chic black woman. So I always felt out of the loop in Cincinnati, like I didn't kind of fit in. And I would always say to my parents, why did you move here? Why did we leave New York? And I wasn't even born then. So my goal was always to get back to New York.
Yeah. And so you leave, okay, so what are your hobbies and what are you doing in school? What do you, your focus is on?
High school, I was like an okay student. I went to Walnut Hills High School, which is a college prep high school. I was really into fashion. I was really into, I didn't start hanging out until 11th grade. I was kind of a geek. And so, I like to design clothes. I was fascinated with everything Star Wars. I love the Carol Burnett show. I love music. I like to dance and hang out with my friends. So kind of basic stuff. I remember one of my best friends was like a computer programmer back then. And I was like, what are you doing? And I would just sit and watch him building computers. And I was like, this is so weird. But I kind of knew it was going to be important, but I didn't know why. I used to play a lot of video games. Kind of like normal Midwestern teenage. I loved all John Hughes movies. So I think I really looked at The Breakfast Club as okay, that's going to be my life. I'm going to get out. But I felt cool like that. The Cosby Show back then was kind of okay, this is going to be how I live one day.
That's how
Lisa Bonet was my girlfriend in my head, even though I know it's gay.
See, Pretty in Pink was it for me. And the soundtrack and all that. I just saw they showed the movie for the anniversary. In the theater. So it was the whole trilogy.
John Hughes was the best.
And so are you worried about what school you're going to get in? Because you said your grades weren't.
I wasn't. I just wasn't that present about all of that then. So I didn't really have a choice of where I went to school because I'm the 8th person in my family to go to Hampton University. So it was you're going to Hampton, and I just had this conversation with my best friend yesterday. I should have been worried about my grades, but I just was kind of I'll get in. It's Hampton. I'm legacy, whatever. I wasn't that I didn't care. I just wanted to get out of Cincinnati.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you get there, did the life you want or dreamed of, did it start?
So I get to Hampton, and I'm totally freaked out because it's in the South. And I remember calling my parents and being like, why is everybody speaking to me? Like, they were like, you're in the South.
Yeah.
That's what happens.
Yeah.
But what was great, and the lights started going off, was that I met all these really cool people from New York, from D.C., from Maryland. And so they were like my lifeline into urban life and cosmopolitan life and metropolitan, metropolis.
Yeah.
So that was the best thing ever. So I started going home with my friends. When they would go home for the weekends or for holidays, I'd be like, well, can I come with you so that I could get to New York?
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you said mass media.
Mass media arts, yes.
Okay. What is that, like, the focus of it?
So the focus, it's communications.
Okay.
So basically it was kind of newspaper journalism, television journalism. I believe we had to study some PR and advertising, but I ended up getting my freshman year an internship with the American Society of Newspaper Editors, and that is a really pivotal part of the story because I got to work at the Cincinnati Enquirer, which is a Gannett newspaper. It's a big paper with a big circulation. So I was like a gopher for the summer. I, ran errands. I had to go do research, get coffee for people, just kind of basic stuff. But I got paid, so that was great. I could hang out and party with my friends on the weekend and then go to work. And the best thing was all the black reporters at the newspaper and copy editors took an interest in me and kind of really poured into me, and the journalism bug bit me then. Okay. So one reporter, I remember, took me on a stakeout, and I was like, oh, this is really cool. And then one would take me to the baseball game, but they would take me to different things so that I could see and visualize what it would be like to be a reporter and a journalist.
Okay. Were you writing for them any?
At that time, no. I think I maybe got to write one story. Okay. And the funny thing is my mother would be giving me story ideas okay, this is happening in the city. You should write about that. And I was like, okay. But then I would tell the reporters, and they would be psyched because none of them were from Cincinnati. So I kind of had this inside track to the city, which was helpful. Okay.
And what are you doing extracurricular during college?
In college, partying and still interested in fashion. Photography I was really interested in. I don't know. I was kind of exactly how I am, but it's hard to explain. The more I got into journalism, I became the editor of the school paper. Yeah. I was a student leader at school. But it kind of the first 2 years, I was just really kind of wow, I'm out of Cincinnati and I'm having fun and I'm in college and I'm partying. And then I kind of realized I needed to buckle down if I wanted to get to New York. So then suddenly the focus became, how do I get to New York? Okay. And that's when I was like, you got to get better grades. And so I just stopped partying as much. I really started focusing on my schoolwork, and I started making really great grades, and then became the editor of the school paper. Okay. Yeah.
So how did you think that track would look to get to New York? What were you plotting?
So I think my junior year, I started going to these job fairs. So Howard University has a huge job fair, and I met this woman, Monique Greenwood. And Monique at the time was an editor at Children's Business, which was a part of Fairchild. Okay. And she really took an interest in me and got me interviews at Fairchild. And then we had a lot of speakers that would come, because Hampton is a historically black college. So James Baldwin came to speak. Dr. Maya Angelou came to speak. So I would see all these incredible people. And I remember when James Baldwin came to speak, something about him in particular moved me and made me realize that everything that I thought was weird about me or that I didn't understand suddenly made sense. And I just remember being fixated on every word and the way that he talked. And I was like, I still wasn't 100% clear, but I was like, he's like me. Okay. And that was really awesome. There was also this editor from Newsweek magazine named Nolly Moses, and he was Indian, and he came to speak, and I had to take him to the airport as part of what we do at Hampton. And he and I had this great conversation. So then I started interviewing at Newsweek. So people kind of saw something in me that I didn't really see and helped pull it out of me.
Okay. And what do you think that was they saw in you?
I mean, as if I look back, I would say that they saw a curiosity, they saw a light. I definitely, have always had this very optimistic, positive attitude. So I would ask a lot of questions. And I think that's, as a kid, ironically, my parents used to call me Mr. Reporter because I asked so many questions. So I guess it was kind of destined that I would become a journalist.
I was going to ask you about the optimism, because you can look at your Instagram and anything you do, you can sort of see this optimism. That was always there? Or you grew into that?
The optimism thing, I think, was always there, but I definitely had to develop it. I mean, there's definitely moments where I got super duper jaded. But it's funny, even now, if someone says, you're going to be late, I'm like, I'm not going to be late. Don't say that. Don't put that curse on me. I think the optimism part also came about, like a few years ago, I went to India and I was there for 6 weeks. And when you see how incredibly luxurious and rich it is, and then how incredibly poor and destitute it is. But what was fascinating to me was everyone was happy. And it didn't matter if you had nothing or you had an embarrassment of riches. Everyone was happy. And so there's something about that spirit. And I remember also going to South Africa and going and just noticing how, like in Soweto, like people were happy and they were like, they didn't have a lot. And so there was that gratitude and appreciation for what you have has been something that's just grown in me. I think it was always there, but I don't think I think I took it for granted.
Okay. Yeah. And how do you cultivate that? Because it can be easy to forget it.
I think it's easy to forget it, but I definitely have had a lot of ups and downs in my professional career that kind of were like, humbling moments where you're like, you kind of can't take things for granted. Like, you should appreciate what you have. And my parents kind of always instilled that in me, but I definitely think there were moments when I was at Earn Cheaper Vibe that I took for granted. Like, I started drinking the Kool-Aid and getting caught up in the bling and the parties and like almost like it was owed to me. And then kind of not having all of that kind of made me appreciate it more. But I've had moments in my life where I've just had these really incredible, blessed experiences. And so then you finally just cultivate and learn, through Buddhism, through, going to church, through yoga, how do you become your better self?
Oh, okay. Do you have like a daily practice of things you do?
I mean, I get up every morning, I pray, I meditate, I read a bunch of inspirational quotes and books, and I'm very, very focused. I go to church almost every Sunday. I'm really active at First Corinthian Baptist Church in Harlem. But I meditate a lot. I'm very spiritual.
Oh, okay. What kind of meditation you do?
Just kind of basic breathing and, so a friend was recommending that I try transcendental meditation. I've not done that, but I'm interested in doing it. I work with a vision coach, and so she and I do a lot of meditation practices and deep meditation and different types. And then obviously when I was in India, I got to do a lot because I went to an Ayurvedic clinic in the Kerala and I was there for about 2 weeks. And that was really amazing to be in India and study kind of yoga and real meditation, like with, the Arabian Sea right there and just kind of in the middle of paradise in a way, but really being still. Okay. And so I really practice a lot of stillness.
And did you see like immediate change in your life?
I think it's been gradual, and I think part of it too is just growing up, like thinking about what's important and what's real. Friends have been very, very important to me. I've been really blessed to have these amazing friends that we all stick by each other through thick and through thin. So a lot of it's just learning.
So going back to getting to New York, did you know if you were going to get to New York through school or through a job?
So I had a plan. So the plan was, listen, the C student went to the A student really quickly in the 4 years in Hampton. And I think being in Virginia, I realized I was like, okay, this is cool, but this is almost not worse than Cincinnati, but it's like I'm literally on the Chesapeake Bay in the middle of nowhere in the Bible Belt, surrounded by military bases. So I was like, I got to get out of here. So the plan was to either go to graduate school or to get a job. So I did this very audacious move that I sent a letter to Condé Nast, and I think it was like the 20th anniversary of the Kerner Commission report that said how there was a lack of, in quotes, minorities in the newsroom. So I basically sent it to Condé Nast and said, this is the 20th anniversary of the Kerner Commission report. There's still not enough minorities in the newsroom. So I'm here to solve your problems. And they were like, okie dokie, can you come in for an interview?
Okay.
So for my spring break, my best friend's stepmother lived in Brooklyn. So we came to New York, and I interviewed at Condé Nast, Newsweek, and Rolling Stone, and Fairchild. Simultaneously, I applied for my master's at NYU in American Studies and Columbia Journalism School. And the heavens opened up the day that the Columbia University envelope arrived in my mailbox, and I was accepted to the journalism school, which is the best journalism school in the country. And I mean, from being the C student in high school to transforming into this A student who graduated with honors and department honors and got into Columbia, it was kind of like mind-blowing to me. But that was the moment that I was like, okay, I can do whatever I want to do. I can create my destiny.
Okay. Was it easy for you to become that student? Like it was already there in you?
I think it's about applying yourself. I think, again, I just was kind of tuned out for various reasons. I was overweight as a kid. I wasn't out as a kid. And I think that all of those things, and there's other things too that just were kind of suppressing me. Okay. And I think when I got to college, I found myself. And I started like dyeing my hair and weird haircuts and dressing crazy, but it was expressing myself, and it was okay to do that. But even that was kind of a struggle. And I remember my big brother was like, "You can't worry about what people say. Like you have blonde hair and you're wearing like a Willie Smith outfit. Like they're gonna say stuff." So
that's why you wear those things.
That's why you wear these things. So he's like, "Buck up," So it was. Yeah, it was a growth and a kind of transformation, and it's been a continual transformation and journey.
So you're at Columbia and you have this new spark.
Yes.
And are you writing a lot? Like, do you still want to be at a magazine? You're not sure of that yet?
So I was very focused at this point that I wanted to work in magazines, and my goal at that time was that I wanted to be a magazine editor by the time I wanted to have my own magazine. Actually, by the time I was 30. And I wanted to be a millionaire, and I wanted to live in Paris. That was the story. So when I got to Columbia, most of my class was about, I think, 300. Most people were either focused on being broadcast journalists on television or newspaper journalists. I was the only one that was interested, that was like raising my hand, like, I want to be a magazine writer. So because of that, the magazine writing professors really took an interest in me, and I was black. So it was like, I was an anomaly. Yeah. And fortunately for me, they all took really great interest. But it was my cultural affairs reporting professor, Samuel G. Friedman, who wrote a lot, still writes for the Times about culture. He was the one that said, you go out to these hip-hop parties all the time. Why don't you write about that? Because at this point, it's 1989, and hip-hop is really growing. Yeah. And so I started writing about hip-hop. And I credit him for really putting me on the trajectory of what would become Vibe and kind of the rest of my career.
Okay. Oh, guys, a bunch of things there. Why do you think that you were like the only person in magazines that was interested in it?
I don't know. I mean, it was kind of interesting because everyone wanted to work for the New York Times or be on like at a major network news show. And you could see it. Like, people literally looked like, Watergate or, Barbara Walters. And, yeah, I don't know. I mean, people took the magazine writing classes as electives, but I was the only one that was like, no, seriously, I really want to work at a magazine. And, like, I was a ferocious magazine reader at the time. And it was just, I was like, that's what's happening.
What was your magazine going to look like?
My magazine was going to basically look like what Vibe became. I had to do a magazine when I was at Hampton, like for one of my classes. You had to create a magazine, and mine was called Noir, which is black and French. So it was all about black culture and fashion and style and music. So when Vibe came about, which we're jumping ahead, but that literally was probably very close to what I envisioned the magazine I would edit or own.
Okay. So you got you're in school.
Yes.
You're on the path.
Yes.
And so but the hip hop culture, how did you get into that? How did that affect you?
So
going to the parties,
hip hop culture. So what was great was I had all these friends from Hampton that were in New York, and so like one of my good friends, his mother worked at WBLS, so I would go to parties with him. Another friend, I don't know, like his sister, who also went to Hampton, just were friends with like rappers. And so like I remember going to Heavy D's birthday party or like Red Alert's birthday party and all this at the Red Parrot. And I would get to go to all these awesome parties, and then a couple of my big sister from Hampton is Jocelyn Cooper. And so Jocelyn Cooper was in music publishing and is the person who basically discovered D'Angelo, and she is now one of the founders of Afropunk. So she really kind of took me under her wing. So people would just take me to parties. It was at a very charmed entry into New York. Simultaneously, I met a bunch of people who were getting their masters in fine arts. And so they took me to all these cool underground New York clubs. So it was like I was going to hip hop parties, and then I was going to like the Tunnel and the World and Mars and 1018 and Sound Factory and all that stuff. So I had this really cool entry into New York, but I was in school, so I couldn't while out too much because it was a 9-month master's program, and it was very, very rigorous. So I would just work really hard during the week. And I was interning at Emerge magazine when I was at Columbia, because Wilmer Ames, who was a former editor, I believe at Fortune, started his own black culture magazine called Emerge. And so he said, well, if you'd like, you can intern at Emerge. I'll pay you. And so I would report things for him, do fact checking and stuff like that, and I'd go in a couple times a week, and then I could use their computers and stuff like that, and then I also got paid. So that was really awesome.
And the hip hop that you were covering, were you just writing about the parties, the music?
At that time, it was about the music and emerging groups. I remember one of the big stories I did at Columbia was kind of about the African griot and storytelling and making the connection to who rappers were and what they represented for the black community and black culture. So it was kind of very theoretical, but with like real points of view.
Okay.
And then, like Jocelyn and some of my other friends would connect me with A&R people or, product managers to interview them about the music business. So I learned a lot. So I was just like a sponge at that point. I was just observing all of it. But a lot of it was very kind of theoretical stuff. Yeah. And Columbia.
And it's a 9-month program.
It's a 9-month program.
Okay. So are you feeling under the pressure that I got 9 months to make things pop?
No, I think I have to say I was really intimidated about going to Columbia at first, because I thought, oh my gosh, I'm coming from this historically black college. I used to be a C student in high school. How am I at an Ivy League school in New York City and the best journalism school in the country? And what I learned when I got there was I was completely prepared and ready. And I felt like I was holding my own. And the great thing about the Columbia J School is that it's generational. So there were people who were like on their second or third career, who might have been like a surgeon or a lawyer, and they decided to be a journalist. There were a lot of people out of college, but I felt like I could hold my own, and I felt good, and I kind of blossomed there. So that was really, really cool. And at that point, I just was like, okay, here we go. Like, I'm in the city. Next stop, magazines. Let's go.
So by the time you graduate, how are things set up for you? Like, what's
so next? I was really, really focused on getting a job. So at this point, I think I'm starting to become my adult self. So I'm like, okay, what's the plan? I have to get a job at a magazine. So I applied to all these places. I went back to all the places that I had applied to before, which I'm not going to say they were mad, but they got why I needed to go to Columbia. But I think they were kind of like, oh, we're losing him to, J school. So I applied for all these jobs, and I ended up getting an assistant job at Metropolitan Home magazine in the articles department. And that was awesome to me because they had just won a national magazine award for general excellence. It was a beautiful magazine. My father, aside from being a lawyer, was an architectural engineer, and he and my mother built our house in Cincinnati. And at the time, Metropolitan Home magazine was owned by Meredith, which is based in Des Moines, Iowa, which is where my mother's from. So to me, I'm like, well, here we go. The stars aligned again. I'm supposed to be here. So, so I worked there, and I'm an assistant, and I'm supporting the articles director and 4 other editors. And this is pre-computer email. Like, I'm faxing stuff, I'm Xeroxing things, I'm answering like all these phone lines, I'm getting people's lunch. I mean, it's like Devil Wears Prada for real. But it was really great. And again, all these editors poured into me, and I think I might have been was I the only black person there? I might have been the only black person there. I think I was. And so that was cool. So I was like the cool black kid who just graduated from Columbia and was very fashionable with crazy hairstyles. And one of the editors there was gay. And I confided in him that, I was struggling with coming out. And he kind of took me under his wing and kind of really coached me on coming out. And so I came out while I was there. So that was really cool.
And what does coaching on coming out look like?
Well, it's kind of like telling me that I'm okay. And encouraging me to live my authentic life and be my authentic self, and to really realize that there's nothing wrong with me. But then also he covered fashion for the magazine, so he took me to my first fashion shows, and he had a partner at the time, and they had a really cool apartment in the Lower East Side. But it was a very gay-friendly place at Metropolitan Home, and they supported DIFA, the Design Industry Fights AIDS, and were a big part of Love Ball, which was a big AIDS benefit that fashion and home design people participated in. So I volunteered at that. So it was very, very, it was very nurturing for me, and it was okay for me to be gay there.
And so was it like the balance of being gay, openly gay in your private life, but also like in your business, like in the...
Right. Which for me was important, because I felt like I was hiding parts of myself. And it was funny because I remember we were on a trip with the whole staff for a sales conference, and a bunch of the guys came up to me on the plane, and they were like, so what's the deal? And I was like, well, what do you mean, what's the deal? And they were like, well, are you gay? And I was like, yeah, but why does it matter? We're at work. And they were like, well, you can be out at work. And I was like, you can? And they were like, yeah, it's fine. And so it was this really cool thing, but I kind of felt like I was being bullied in the moment. But they were like, we've seen you at the club. And I was just like, we've seen you at the Roxy with like silver shorts or something crazy. And I was like, okay. So that was cool. So that was kind of how I really came out. And while I was there, I came out to my family, and that wasn't a great experience. But everyone at work was super duper nurturing and like, you'll be okay. They'll get through it. My brother was very, very supportive, but that was but it was important for me to come out. Like, I could not, and that's why I encourage a lot of people to come out, because for me, being in the closet, I felt like I was half dead. Like, I was hiding and lying. And if my mother asked me why I wasn't dating Tyra Banks one more time, I was going to lose my mind. It's like, well, really? Tyra Banks? Yeah.
We run in different circles.
I mean, I love Tyra Banks, but like, I mean, yeah, it's like, really? I mean, aim high, I guess.
So, how long are you at Metropolitan?
So I was at Metropolitan Home for 2.5 years.
Okay.
This is an important part of the story, too. So when I graduated from Columbia, I get the job at Metropolitan Home, which is a good job. Like, they just won the National Magazine Award. I'm an assistant. Those are hard jobs to get. Samuel G. Friedman from Columbia is like, I spoke to the Times, and they want you to write for them for Arts and Leisure. So I'm like, score.
Yeah.
So I did, and I can't remember who it was, and I want to say it was August Wilson. Like, I think I reviewed like an August Wilson play, and then, which I need to dig up actually, and then he said, why don't you pitch them a story about hip hop and kind of the history of storytelling in the Black community? And so I pitched it, but it was tricky. Like, they didn't get it. It probably was a little bit too advanced for where I was in my writing skills at that time and level. And it didn't run. But another friend, I hung out with a bunch of young people that worked at magazines and in publishing, and someone recommended me for a job to be the menswear reporter for the Associated Press. So I was doing that while I was an assistant. Crazy. So I'd be like, I'm going to lunch, but I'd really be going to like a Calvin Klein fashion show. And then I would write at night or early in the morning. And then someone connected me with an editor at the Chicago Tribune, and they wanted a freelance writer in New York to write about fashion and design and style. And I started doing that. So it was really kind of cool, and I would always have to do the interviews, like, you know, at lunch or after work or on the weekend. Like, it was like, no, I can't do it at 11, but I could do it at 1. You know, maybe.
Don't ask why.
Don't ask why, exactly. So, and it's crazy that I was that young. I mean, I was like 21.
Yeah,
and so then I was there for 2 years, and a group of my friends, like I said, worked at different magazines. And one of the friends was Jonathan Van Meter, who was called to be the editor-in-chief of Vibe magazine by Time Warner and Quincy Jones. And so he said, I have a bunch of friends who work in magazines. Could I possibly hire them to be editors at this startup? Yeah. And they said, as long as they're qualified, sure. And so one worked at Vanity Fair, one worked at, I mean, we all had great jobs. And so I told my parents I was quitting my job, and they're like, what are you doing? And I was like, no, I'm going to go work on this startup. And they're like, what? And then I'm like, well, it's a hip hop music magazine. It doesn't have a name, but it's being started by Time Inc. and Warner Brothers. And they're like, okay. And I was like, and Quincy Jones is the founder. And they're like, oh, okay, go.
Okay.
Yeah,
well,
Quincy Jones, you can go. Yeah.
So, are you taking all of these positions because they're just coming to you, or because they get the experience? Are you looking something to get from them?
I mean, well, the magazine job, like, I wouldn't say, you know, in my mind, I should have been an assistant at Vogue or GQ or Vanity Fair or, you know, someplace glitzy like that, or even like Rolling Stone. But Metropolitan Home, because it was such a beautiful magazine, it was super well written. They did a lot of like blended families and gay couples and pro-social things. It was cool. Yeah. Like, so, and the other things, I think I was trying to fill the void of, like, I wanted to stay connected with writing about pop culture and fashion and style, because those were things. Remember, my father told me, try to combine practical with your creative. So I was like, well, if I'm a writer, then I can write about style, music, culture, fashion, and film and theater, and then it's still finding that balance and making money, I guess.
Okay. So how is that whole process of the beginning, starting up with Vibe?
Oh my gosh, like the best time of my life, because literally, you know, creating something that was representative of what was happening in popular culture. It was still underground at that point. It wasn't mainstream. But really giving this directive to come up with something that was like Rolling Stone and Vanity Fair, but about hip hop and urban culture and black people was really exciting. And then just working with all these incredible people. First of all, you have to remember who the staff writers were when we started. It was Kevin Powell, Scott Polson Bryant, and Joan Morgan. So I'm like, hi.
Yeah.
Michaela Angela Davis was there. George Pitts, who just passed away, was the photo editor. So there were just all these amazing, Alan Light. Like there are all these just amazing, brilliant people that I knew and had heard about. And suddenly we're all sitting in a boardroom at a table brainstorming story ideas. So it was really exciting. It was really fun. And it was one of those moments where you're in the zeitgeist. Like you're creating something that's mirroring what's happening in popular culture. And so it was the best. It was so much fun.
Could you feel the excitement? Okay.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, from just being able to go into work and like visualizing like this was my dream come true. So it's like I'm going to work and I'm working with all like a multicultural, young, cool, creative staff, and there were a lot of gay people, and it was a lot of feminists, and just, you know, it was exciting.
What was how long was the process from you started it until the preview issue was with Tretch?
The preview Tretch issue. So we started, I want to figure this out. We started in the spring, and then I think I want to say, but you have to fact check me, I think it was 92, and then we worked on that for about 9 months. And then they said, okay, so we have to test it and all this stuff. So we're like, what? Like, we're not going to keep going? And they're like, no, we're going to take a break and test it and see how it does. And if it goes well, we will call you back, and hopefully your jobs will be available. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me right now.
Which is scary because you've quit.
I quit, but I wouldn't have done it differently. Now, again, here we go with my life. Gil Rogan, who was our editorial director from Time Inc., was like, we really like you. What if we placed you at People Magazine in the break? And I'm like, okay. Sure, People Magazine. Hi. So I go to People Magazine, and I'm a reporter researcher for People Magazine, working on the best and worst dressed issue, which is like kind of cool because I'm like, well, I love fashion and this is fun, and I feel like I have good taste, so let's go. So I go in, and then they keep me on because they like me, and then I was like reporting on like Eddie Murphy's wedding to Nicole, and you know, just reporting on all these stories, and sometimes it's, you know, stuff I loved, and sometimes it wasn't, but I was working at People Magazine. So I was there for about 9 months. And then I remember my boss at the time called me in, and she said, so they're going to launch 5. They want you back, but you don't have to go. And I was like, but I kind of have to go. But I was like, but I kind of love people, but I have to go back. And so I went back. And so on the test issue, I edited the front of the book and the back of the book. So it was like news stuff and then reviews and kind of columns. And it was fun. But then when I came back, they said, we want to move your position. So I'm like, okay. And I was an associate editor in the beginning. And they said, we want you to edit the new talent section because you seem to be really interested in new artists. And I was like, okay, cool. And so I started doing that, and that really is an important part of the story because the people that I ended up picking would end up becoming the superstars of urban music and hip-hop and R&B who would eventually become cover stars. So that was really, really a pivotal moment. So everyone from Mary J. Blige, who I wrote about in the test issue, to putting Maxwell in the magazine before he had a record deal. He tells the story all the time when he sees me. He's like, I was waiting tables at coffee shop, and then you put me in the magazine. But Brandy, TLC, Usher, Missy Elliott, you name it.
Mm-hmm. What do you think it was about you that had this insight to see people before they became the big stars they were?
Well,
Like,
I think whatever I do, I throw myself into it like 1,000%. I can't help myself. It's my personality. So for me, it was like, I'm going to be the new talent editor. I'm going to be the new talent editor. So I'm like, so people would bring me music and I would listen to everything. Like I would get cassette tapes and I'd be like, I have to listen to it. I mean, I remember getting the Biggie, it was a Biggie Craig Mack mixtape that Bad Boy put out. And it was called Big Mac. And so puffy. And just being so excited because it's like, well, there was so much buzz on the streets. And then also, it was about listening to people. So we had really great editors. Assistants. Mimi Valdez was an assistant and was like, oh, I met this kid Biggie in Brooklyn and he's really amazing. You got to check him out. So people would bring me stuff. Rob Kenner would be like, there's this great new reggae artist named Shabba Ranks that you should check. You know, it was just stuff like that. And I would listen. So I would listen to everything. And then I would put together this. I had a formula for like one rapper, one R&B, and I would always do an electronic dance artist. So like Ultra Nate or somebody like that. And then like either reggae or maybe someone that was like from DC, like a go-go artist or a jazz artist. Like I always try to have this mix. Because in my mind, the next section, which was the new talent section, was like a mini microcosm of what Vibe represented. So I just focused on that way.
And how do you have to do that but still keep it, hip hop is always the umbrella? Is that always the goal of it?
Yeah, hip hop, but we were really clear that it was about urban music and culture. So it was hip hop and R&B, but dance hall and alternative music and very underground music. And what was cool and what was hot.
And I guess you feel like you have to trust your reader that you like this, but I'm going to turn you on to this also.
Exactly. And then also like, you may not get this, but you will. So like covering someone like Groove Theory, it's like, this is different, but it's going to become a classic, trust me. Or D'Angelo. You know, like all these artists are people that were in the next section when I edited. So it was really, really cool.
And how long were you at Vibe?
I was at Vibe, like 11 years. So I went from associate editor, then I moved to fashion because I chose to go to fashion. And I wanted to be I became the style editor. And so that was a great hybrid that they let me write the job description. And so it was editing features related to style, but also curating fashion shoots that were about music and culture and urban sportswear and stuff like that. So the first story that I get to style is Tyson Beckford, because Scott Paulson Bryant was doing a big feature that he was signed to Polo. And so, I mean, that I was like, well, easy. And then the first cover that I ever styled for Vibe.
Which was a big deal then. If people,
oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was huge having him.
It was huge. And it was amazing, and he always remembers. I mean, so that's the thing. Like, I had all these really awesome moments. But the first cover that I ever styled for Vibe was the Biggie and Faith cover.
I remember that.
Yeah, that was and I was like horrified because I was like, I don't know if I'm ready to style a cover, and it's Biggie. Because I had styled Faith for the next section. But it got bumped into the feature well because she was blowing up and was Biggie's wife and the whole thing.
And the process for styling, like you come up with a concept and then you have to connect with their people.
Yeah, and you connect with the people and you come up with kind of the visual concept, you pull all the clothes, and then you execute on the set. So it's fittings and all this stuff. It's crazy. But I loved it.
How do you know when it works or when it doesn't work? At what point? Because you know this before the final, before it's on the cover. So if it worked or didn't,
we were of this mindset where we had to make it work because we didn't have budgets that we could be like I didn't even know reshooting was a possibility till like later in my career. I was like, reshoots? What? So you kind of knew you had one shot and you had to get it. But it was cool because what we were doing was so experimental and so creative. And the artists were really into it because it was a big deal to be on the cover of Vibe or on the pages of Vibe. It was a big deal. So, and people knew we were doing something different. So they kind of went with it. And a lot of them would say, like, I'll do this for you, but don't tell anybody. Like, I can't do it. Like, I'm not going to take my weave out for so-and-so. It's like, okay, girl. So it was fun.
So you had the power to get weaves taken out? You know?
I am credited with putting Little Kim's first weave in her hair.
Really? Yeah. Okay. You can take credit
Kimberly
for that.
Jones. She wanted a weave, and so we put her first weave in.
Okay, you're part of history, definitely. So you leave Vibe. Was Giant next?
I leave Vibe. No. Giant was not next. So I leave Vibe, and I go work with Marc Ecko.
Okay.
And I am at Marc Ecko Cut and Sew. So then I go to the business side, and I am I was vice president of brand development for Marc Ecko Cut and Sew, which was this hybrid job where I oversaw marketing and PR for the new tailored collection that he was launching. I was also kind of this consigliere for Marc, and then I worked on Complex as the style guru. Okay. So I worked really closely with Emil Wilbekin when she was there. And then Marc was developing a video game at the time, his first video game. So, and then it was like the anti-graffiti stuff. I mean, I was like in all of it. He bought a new house. It was like I'd have to go to the house with him. There was a big feature in the New York Times that I got for him. I mean, so it was really, really cool. So I was there for a year. Then I left, and then I freelance wrote. And I started working with Black Voices at AOL at the time. And then I started blogging for 2 years with for Microsoft with LeBron James. Okay. And so that was really awesome. So I traveled all around the world covering LeBron's life off the court and a lot of his philanthropic stuff. And I got to go to China with him and All-Star Weekend. And that was really, really really cool. And so the blog, so that's how I kind of then get into digital and blogging and stuff like that.
Why the digital? Did you miss doing print? Was there something from print?
You know, after I was editor-in-chief of Vibe, I was vice president of brand development at Vibe for about a year or two. And while I did that, I was working with people to develop the website. And this is pre-social media and all that. So I started dabbling in digital. And then I think seeing what Marc was doing with the video games, and digital, like I was like, okay, digital's going to be important. And then I got this call about LeBron, and I thought, okay, so LeBron is, at this point, he's big, but he's not where he's still King James, but he's not as shiny as he is now. But he was big. And then Microsoft, and it was interesting because I helped give input on the site, and then the blogging thing was interesting because I was like, okay, I know how to write short form, but I did post like 3 times a week, and so it was just an happenstance.
So when does Giant come up?
So then Giant came up while I was kind of freelancing. Smokey Fontaine called me in, and I honestly thought that he was going to ask me to do styling or to write. And I sat in his office, and he was like, I'm going to move to digital. I want you to become the editor of the magazine. And I was like, are you okay? And honestly, I did not think that I wanted to go back to magazines because Vibe to me was like my big love affair and my first big love affair. So it was kind of like, I was like, yeah, I'm good. I don't know. But then, it was owned by Radio One and Interactive One, and, it was a black radio station, and Kathy Hughes and Alfred Liggins. And I thought, okay, I'm going to do it. And this is also when Obama was running for president. So I'm like, there's a shift coming. And so, and real talk, I needed insurance. And so I was like, I'll take it. And so I did that for a year. And then because Interactive One was all focused on digital, there was a lot of emphasis put on relaunching the website for Giant Magazine, giantmag.com. And I had to sit in all these crazy digital meetings like every week. And I would be in there like, why am I in here?
Yeah.
But osmosis, I was sitting in there taking all this stuff in, not really getting it. And then suddenly would realize how important it was. And then so I was at Giant for a year. And then they were thinking about folding the magazine because it was too expensive. And Time Warner recruited me to come work at Essence to be the managing editor of the website.
Okay.
And they were vigilant. And it was kind of like, I was like, I don't know if I want to work at a women's magazine. I don't know. But then I kind of saw like they had a big staff, it had a big budget.
Okay.
And they wanted me to relaunch the site to make it younger and cooler and hipper. And I mean, come on, Essence is like a part of our history. It's a part of our culture. It's a huge cornerstone of black media. So I was like, okay, fine, I'll do it. And I ended up there for 5 years. Okay. So I worked on the website for 2.5 years. We did 2 relaunches, and then they found out that I was very connected with celebrities. So they were like, what if we move you to become editor-at-large of Essence to manage all the talent relations across the brand, so digital, social media, the festival, which I worked in partnership with Joy Collins, Prophet, and then also working on like Black Women in Hollywood, Black Women in Music. But the best part was booking the covers.
Okay.
Because they were like, we need a younger, fresher kind of positioning on the covers. So I did that for 2.5 years, and it was amazing.
Okay. Is there anything missing that when you, as opposed to starting a magazine, being there at the beginning, to being plugged into something that's already a tradition, has a history to it? Like,
it's all hard.
Your take into it? It's
all hard because the thing is, with startups, it was like brand new and a fresh idea. But like, for instance, Essence was the first time I work at Time Inc. and I'm at this big corporation and it's like tons of money and tons of resources. But there was this, at that time, 40-something-year-old brand, and they really wanted to make it more fresh and young and kind of, what I learned later was that they do this every, they have to. They have to keep current. So they would do it every 5 years. But it was hard because it was legacy, and people were very comfortable with seeing certain, Angela Bassett or Jada Pinkett Smith or Queen Latifah on the cover, and Nia Long, so Mary J. Blige. So then it was like, well, how do you introduce new people? And then newsstand sales were really important. But it was exciting, and the artists wanted to seem different and fresh and cool. So it was fun. I had a lot of fun, and it was a great experience for me because everyone at Essence, I'm still very close to them. It was very much like family. Okay. So the good part is, startups or established brand, everybody was always like a family.
So for how far when you start doing World of Wonder, your own thing?
World of Wilbekin?
Yeah, Wilbekin. What is the Wonder? That's something totally different.
Yeah, that's different. That was very different. So the juicy part of the story is Time Warner decides to spin off Time Inc. I get laid off with 500 people in one day. Okay. But I wanted to start my own thing, but I didn't know what it looked like or what it would be, and I was kind of scared to do it. And I was working, like I said, with a vision coach, and she's, I called her like all freaked out because I've never lost a job before. And she said, well, congratulations, the universe gave you what you asked for. Okay. And I was like, okay. And I licked my wounds for about a month, drank a lot. Yeah. And then a friend of mine who's American Indian said, come to India. And so I thought, perfect, because I wanted to go somewhere where I didn't know the culture, I didn't know the language, and I would be completely out of my comfort zone. And I went, and I was supposed to go for 4 weeks, and I stayed for 6. Okay. And it was the best thing I could have done, because I literally just shed everything. Yeah. And it opened my eyes to what global really looks like in that part of the world. because you're so close to the Middle East, you're so close to Africa, it's a different world. And I just shook everything off and came back. And while I was there, I was like, well, what do I want to do? And I said, what was the original dream when you came to New York? So the original dream when I came to New York was to help move culture and create images of black people and people of color that were like rock stars and that were elevated. And so I thought, okay, World of Wilbekin can be that. But then also I wanted to create something to give back to black gay men. And that part I hadn't figured out, but I did when I came back.
Okay. So this was, had you forgotten about that original dream?
I think so. I mean, I think you get lost in your life. You know, I mean, I never thought I would be the first black openly gay editor-in-chief of a mainstream magazine and win a national magazine award and be in, Paris or Milan having dinner with Donatella Versace and Puff Daddy and Kate Moss and all these people. I mean, it happened. And then I never thought that I wouldn't have that after that. And so, there's just so many things I didn't know. And I definitely kind of lost, like, who am I? Where am I? What's important to me? And so, if I go back to what we talked about earlier, so the optimism has been born out of these really high points, but then some low points. And always being appreciative of what you have in the moment, because that's all you have is the moment.
And what is your future plans now with WOW? Hashtag WOW.
Hashtag WOW. So currently I am looking for funding and investors so that I can really fully visualize and bring it to life, right? It hasn't been really actualized the way that I see it.
Okay.
But I'm having a lot of fun with it. And then the side thing that has popped up is that Native Son, which is about inspiration and empowerment for black gay men, has a life of its own. And it has really taken off, and it takes up most of my time. And is really filling this void for black gay men that they're very hungry and thirsty for and want to be a part of. And so it's just growing and building. And then to launch it at a time when Moonlight was coming out and to be a part of supporting that and actually being at the Oscars the night that they won, it's a very interesting moment. And I think it's an interesting moment with what's going on in politics and the government, because kind of being other is almost more important now. And it's, to me, very similar to like the civil rights movement. And it's like, it's time to really stand up and be present and be seen. So to me, World of Wilbekin and Native Son both support that. It's about being other and living your life authentically and being empowered and being confident and living your life in full and in color. And I think it's more important now, especially with younger people, to show them examples of what that looks like historically, but also what that looks like moving forward.
Well, it sounds wonderful. I wish you thank you for doing this.
Thank you. This is awesome.
Thank you. I wish you the best with everything.
Thank you. Cool.
And there you go. A wonderful conversation with my guest on episode 123, Emil Wilbekin. Follow him online at Instagram, Emil Wilbekin, EmilWilbekin. Also, Native Son has a spot on Instagram, Native Son Now, and also his webpage, worldofwilbekin.com. I am online several places, several ways. TalkMusicTalk.com for more podcast information. My personal website is thisisvoice.com, where you can find out more on my music and the novels that I write. I am on Instagram and Twitter at This Is Voice, BOICE. Call to action, download the Talk Music Talk app. That's right, there is an app. Every single episode of this podcast, you can get it wherever you get your apps. It is free for iPhone and Android, or you can subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or Google Play. And if you are on iTunes, may I suggest that you review and or leave a rating to help expose the show to more listeners. You can also find the podcast on Stitcher, TuneIn. Just search for Talk Music Talk on Stitcher or TuneIn. I am on SoundCloud, starting with episode 100, soundcloud.com/thisisboyce. And once you do that, I have a back catalog suggestion for you. Episode 99 with Camila. If you love Tracy Chapman's voice, if you love Joan Ormer-Trading's voice, you will love Camila. She did an exclusive Talk Music Talk mini set in her studio. Episode number 99 with Camila. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Till next time, and there will be a next time. This one's for you, Liz.